Hi everyone, Tyler Mannion here, NPC and IPB Pro League Vice President, and this will be your Men's Open Mr. Olympia recap. So we had a ton of great competitors this year. I really think this has been the deepest the Men's Open division has been in quite a long time. First, I'm going to go through with the top two. Obviously, it was very close between Samson and Hadi. We'll break it down pose for pose. Then afterwards, I'll review some of the other guys in the top six. So first up is the front double bicep pose. Samson and Hadi both have very, very strong front double bicep poses. For me, Samson's front double has improved show to show and year over year. His arms have come up considerably, both the biceps and the triceps. His whole inner arm is very good now, in my opinion. As you see, he has nice V-taper going into a nice small waist. His waist control and ab control was very good at this show. Then you move into the lower body, and Samson obviously has some of the best legs and the best quads in the open division. Very good overall balance with this pose. The one thing I always said about Samson in this pose is, yes, could his lats be a little bit more dramatic? Could you have a little bit more of a taper? Yes, but I think that's increased dramatically. Now for Hadi also has a very good front double bicep, solid arms into a very pronounced V-taper into a nice small waist. And then Hadi always has great legs from the front that are very conditioned. However, for me at this show, I feel like his legs overall, not just in this pose, but overall, were a little bit downsized. And even though the top to bottom is very good, I still think being downsized throws off that perfect balance just a little bit for him. And for that reason, even though Hadi's taper is a little bit more dramatic, I think the overall balance of the pose, all the body parts flowing together, for me, I give it to Samson to make it 1-0. Next up is the front lat spread pose. For me, this is Hadi's weakest pose. As you see here, his waist obviously looks wider in this pose compared to his front double bicep pose. You can see he still needs more thickness to the chest. Obviously, he has detailed chest, but he needs more thickness to the chest. And the overall roundness to his outer arms and shoulders is very good, but when you compare it to someone like Samson, you see the difference here. Again, with the legs, good conditioned quads from the front, but a little bit downsized for me. Now you go to Samson. Samson has very, very round and thick and full outer arms and shoulders. His chest is extremely thick. You see striation and detail in his chest. This pose, in the past couple of shows, you could see he was having a little problem with his midsection. It would be a little bit distended. Here, both Friday and Saturday, it was not at all. The way he hits this pose, very, very dramatic V-taper. He really gets his lats out very well here. And again, you go down into the lower body. The quads are crazy full. We saw clear separation this time. The balance from the top to bottom makes this one of his strongest poses, in my opinion. So obviously, being one of Hadi's weaker poses to Samson's arguably strongest, I think this was a clear shot for Samson to make it 2 poses to 0. Next up is the side chest pose. So when we look at Hadi, again, one of his weaknesses, I would say, if he has one, is he needed more size to his legs from the side. Even at his best, which in my opinion was the Arnold Classic this year, the Arnold Classic US, you could still see he could still use a little bit more of that thickness to the side leg. So here the legs were down a little bit, and even really his overall conditioning, which is Hadi's trademark, is the striations through his chest and obviously the very, very detailed midsection. For me, we saw that Hadi's chest was not as detailed this time around, both on Friday and on Saturday. He just was lacking that trademark skinless striation chest, and he needs that because his chest is on the flatter side. Now, again, shoulders and arms were solid. The whole pose is still a very solid pose, but he was going up against an all-time best Samson. It's not the front lat spread, it's the side chest for Samson's strongest pose. Arms and shoulders, very full, very big, very round. Chest, extremely full. Also seeing detail and striation through it. Midsection, flat and in check. Side leg, very dramatic. Quad to hamstring balance. Hamstring drop. We see the lines in it. We see the separation. This pose shows off the overall muscularity of Samson and really is a pose where I think you see the massive size difference between these two competitors. So for me, another clear pose for Samson to make this 3 poses to 0. Next up is the back double bicep pose. And surprisingly, Samson brought this pose up a lot. You see from the back, he has crazy hamstrings. They were separated. They were detailed. Samson's probably someone that's never going to get crazy separated glutes, but you still see the condition that he was in, even with the glutes here. The back of his arms and shoulders improved a lot. We see the bicep peak. We see all the detail and separation in his arms. His shoulders are the best they ever looked. Moving into, which was once his weakest body part, his back, he improved the taper and dramatically improved the depth and thickness of his back. So again, top to bottom balance, very, very good for him. Now here for Hadi, I think this is where we saw that it wasn't Hadi in his normal self, because normally his back double bicep is very strong. It was probably his most improved pose from last year's Olympia to the Arnold. So it was a little bit surprising to see that from the back here, we didn't see the same as we saw in Samson, the roundness and the separation and the fullness with the shoulders and the arms. And then the back itself, he was actually a little bit soft. So we didn't see that separated, grainy, dense, hard look, which he's always harder from the front than he is from the back. But this time, we can notice a softness in this back double bicep pose. Go down into the lower body. Obviously, he was in shape, but his leg width and his hamstring detail definitely could have been better. We've seen it better before, and this was a pose where we saw that Hadi, I don't think, was at 100% of his best. So, very surprisingly to me, I ended up giving this pose to Samson. 4 poses to 0. Next up is the back lat spread pose. So the back lat spread is one of Hadi's strongest poses. Even though his back looked softer than normal in his back double bicep, the amount of thickness that he really carries in his back shines through even when he's not at his best in this pose. Very, very wide lats, very thick. We still saw the detail in the lines in the back here. Again, the lower body has been better, but it was in shape. We could see the hamstrings. The leg width was solid. I think this was one of Hadi's strongest poses on the day. Now for Samson, again, lower body is in, very big, separated, look great. The back itself actually improved a lot. I thought he was very comparable with not only Hadi, but also Derek as well in this pose. Even when he was hitting this pose, to me, I still feel like he could pull those lats out just a little bit more. It's the best he ever hit the pose. It's the best his back ever looked, but it still feels like there's something more there, that he could give himself more of that width in that illusion. But as you can see, we saw the separation and we see the thickness and the depth to his back. This pose has improved tremendously for him, but with how strong it still was for Hadi, I gave this pose to Hadi to make it 4 poses to 1. Next up is the side tricep pose. So Samson in the side tricep pose, I think, was just doing himself a little bit of a disservice with his leg placement. He has crazy legs from the side. You want to show that size with the same placement that he has in the side chest. When you place your legs this way, you really take away that hamstring and the hamstring drop when you have it the way he does. Now, I don't know the reason, but I would think the reason he did this is because flexibility-wise, it was really hard for him to keep his upper body upright before, to really be able to extend the tricep and also keep his midsection flat, and we saw the abs. So upper body-wise, I thought his positioning was great for this pose, but lower body-wise, it was not. Then also, obviously, we posed these guys a lot of times, and he wasn't even always able to get into this pose the best way possible. Sometimes his upper body still wasn't upright. He was still leaning a little bit forward. And really, when he was doing that, lose detail, lose size, lose fullness. Now, for Hadi, the side tricep is always a very strong pose for Hadi. Why? Because we see all the detail in his midsection. His chest is still striated. Not as much as normal, but we still see the detail there. The side leg shows off the conditioning. And for him, it's still very balanced upper and lower body here. I think because of the detail that was shown in this pose, Samson kind of taking away some of the detail and fullness, which would be his advantage here, I gave this pose to Hadi to make it 4 poses to 2. Next up is the abdominal and thigh pose. Now, Samson looked great this year in his ab and thigh. Again, like I said, he was having some trouble controlling the midsection at previous shows. Here he was not. The midsection was dialed in. The abs were clear. The lines were deep. He has great quads. Overall, he has very nice V-taper flowing into that nice tight waist here. So from the top of his hands all the way down, very balanced, very strong overall pose. However, he's going against Hadi, whose ab and thigh pose is the best in the IFBB Pro League. Hadi's still very strong, all the detail through his midsection, great taper. Quads are still conditioned, they're still there. For this pose, for me, Hadi still has a nice overall balance because in this pose, you're not expanding the lats all the way out, right? So it doesn't really look like any imbalance. Still just such a super strong pose for him that even though Samson improved this pose tremendously, you can still see a little bit of the size difference for him as well. I give this pose to Hadi to make it 4 poses to 3. Then last up would be, your favorite most muscular pose, both hitting basically the same pose, except Hadi hits his most muscular with his knuckles together. Samson grabs the wrist. Now, again, here, I think it was a pose that surprised me because normally Hadi is very, very tough to beat in this pose because of the detail through his chest, because of the detail in the midsection. Basically a lot of his strengths are on display in this pose. The way he hits it, he's still able to be super wide as well from shoulder to shoulder and have that muscularity displaying in the outer arms, the shoulders. But Samson finally nailed his conditioning. Was he the hardest guy on stage? No, but again, the chest is bursting full. We're still seeing striations. The size and the roundness of the shoulders and the arms. We see the detail and still the separation to his abs. Plus, with his lower body and being as big and separated as it was. It's the most muscular pose for a reason, and this displayed how big Samson truly was at this show. You see the size difference between both of these guys. For me, even with Hadi having a little bit extra detail, Samson had much more size and still good detail. Made me give Samson this pose 5 poses to 3. So as you can see, there were some clear shots for each guy, but there was also some very, very close poses. I mean, the front double bicep, very close pose. The back lat spread, very close pose. The most muscular, very close pose. So as you see, the judges were very split on both Friday and Saturday. I think the difference for me was that Samson came back even better on Saturday night, which is also an improvement for him as well. He hasn't always done that, even at shows he's won before. He's kind of basically stayed the same most of the times that he did well. Some of the times he came back just a touch worse. This time, he came back much, much better. Testament to Hadi as well. I think Hadi also came back better on Saturday night. But for me, going pose by pose, I think Samson was able to edge him out, on both nights. But 2 very, very great competitors. They both had amazing years. Hadi ended up beating him 2 times at the beginning of the year. Samson now figured it out and took home the Mr. Olympia title. And I can't wait to see these 2 guys, going toe-to-toe for the next couple of years.